It's the first time for me as well using
Alright.
Riverside for actually recording something which is going to go out there in the public. So,
Alright.
welcome, Arthur. It is my pleasure to talk to you this morning. It's morning there, it's afternoon here in Finland. But, the purpose of this recording slash talk is to shed a little bit of light what is going on in the world of communication in the age of remote work and remote presentations and remote everything.
Alright.
The age of webcams and talking from home. An author is a speaker and a translator, if I am correct, but please introduce yourself.
Yes, my friend, you are very much correct. I'm Arthur Diaz. I've been a written translator for 11 years now. Interpreter or simultaneous translator for 6. And I've been helping speakers and speaking in conferences and other events for about 3 years now, so I have a few years of experience in different areas. And since the speaking part is the most recent part of my journey, we could say that out of those 3-4 years, almost half of them were spent online due to unforeseen circumstances. So one way or another, I had to get quite acquainted with the webcam.
Yeah, and here we are staring at the webcam again.
Exactly.
And of course, my motivation for having this talk is just to get to know Arthur a bit better myself. I've been talking with him online, but then also as I deal with in the academic world, a lot of conferences, presentations. My students are giving talks, I am giving talks, everybody is giving talks remote, we're having meetings remotely, just to sort of shed a little bit of light of how could we communicate better in this weird age, which is not so weird anymore.
Right.
So, given that you've been dealing more with this topic, what do you think is the absolute biggest difference between giving live presentations and actually delivering impactful talks online?
The biggest thing I can tell is the fact you can't read the room and feed off the energy of the room the same way. Because obviously when you're in the room with people, you can see their reactions, you can see if they're vibing with what you're saying, if they're reacting to it. If you're giving more of a scientific talk, you can see very clearly feedback if they're understanding, if they're following along, or if you're giving a more impactful talk, motivational, or sharing a story, you can see if you're having an effect. Whereas online, it's hard. You're seeing a bunch of squares with faces, or depending how the conference is set up, you might not even be seeing that. You might be seeing a couple people in the back room if it's set up with different rooms for the speakers and the audience. So that instant feedback that you get from the audience is a factor that is hugely different and has a big impact in communicating online instead of offline, instead of being in person.
Is there any way to navigate around that? How would I, someone giving a talk, are there any practical tools or ways that you have noticed that would work for me being able to gauge the audience even a bit better?
I like using the interactive functions a lot when speaking online. And I see other speakers do that with great effect, like really asking people to type questions in the chat or type their agreement in the chat, use emojis from the platform, use reactions, use tools like Mentimeter and other pool tools that you can use to gauge what the audience is feeling, gauge what they're getting, see if they're getting the knowledge you're trying to get across, and trying to navigate that. Because you really aren't going to have that same level of interaction that you're going to have with the audience. Another thing you can do is, if everybody's in the same room, if it's a meeting or more of a small conference, if it's not like 100 participants or 200 participants, if you're talking to a group of 10, 20, maybe 30, you can ask people to actually speak, as you could do in a conference. Say, hey, how do you feel about this? I want someone from the audience to talk, to tell me, to answer this question. So you can build that connection and get a little of that feedback.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea to actually try to push people to talk a bit. So one thing that I've been noticing in even smaller meetings is that energy is no longer contagious the way it was earlier. So if you go into a meeting highly caffeinated, you have had a couple of good cups of coffee, you go there full of energy, and everyone has their webcams turned off, and they're like, hello, I'm here. It gets really awkward soon, and then it's really difficult to try to like spirit up the room. That's something that's been really hard, and it seems to be getting worse. I mean, we've been remote for a couple of years now, and slowly it seems that people are getting more and more, how would I say that, less engaged in those meetings, and it's difficult to battle that situation.
Yeah, the fatigue is setting in for real with having to be remote and this weird sort of connection.
Yeah. So, in academia and probably also somewhere else, slides are used a lot. So, what do you think has changed in presentation techniques, or what are some of the things that we have to pay more attention to when preparing slides now that everything is remote and people are actually just looking at screen share instead of a large screen in front of the hall somewhere?
Right. Well, first, I'd say that now we have more possibilities with screen share in a way. For example, Zoom allows you to use the screen share as background, for example. You lose some of the effects with that. I don't think you can use animations and other things like that when you do that, but you have that effect. If you're working with a production crew, you can probably be in the lower third and with the background, with the slides as background. You can have other strategies in using slides. And there's the advantage that you have that you'd see a lot of presenters live do a terrible mistake, which is put the slides in the background and they keep turning around all the time to look at the slides and losing that visual connection with the audience, which is something you should always avoid. And online you have a little bit less of that. The distance between the screen and the webcam is usually a lot smaller than turning behind. So even if they shift their eyes a little bit, the impact is not as large. Some of the issues that I see that still remain and might have become even worse is busy slides. Slides with like a lot of text. They are not good. They've never been good because we as humans have limited attention. You probably know that very well. We process a very small amount of bits of information per second. And if you're forcing people to read a busy slide and listen to you, they're going to do one or the other. Most people will not be able to pay attention to what's on the slide and what you're saying at the same time. And a lot of people, this still back in regular conferencing days, that's a moment a lot of people look at the huge slide, let out a sigh and pull out their phones or check out something else because they feel overwhelmed by that. Online, that is even worse because the distractions, the temptations are much closer. The person has their browser open, they probably have the email open, they have a couple other pieces of software open. If you give them the reason to disengage a little bit, they probably will. So if you put up that slide with 5 long paragraphs on screen, there's a good chance you're going to lose a chunk of the audience there, that they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I'll ask for the slides and read them later.
And I think that also in online presentations, you can use the presenter mode in a much more guaranteed way. And on that note, actually, it's really tricky to give remote presentations now if you have only one screen, because you cannot use the presenter notes. So you must have 2 screens when you're giving remote presentations.
Yes.
Back in the days when conferences were still live, it was a hit and miss, so you don't know if the setup there actually allows you to see the presenter notes. But now you will always have access to them as long as you have 2 screens, because you can just share the second screen and then look at the notes on your primary screen.
Exactly.
But then the problem that I've noticed there is the same that I'm actually experiencing right now, because I don't want to be staring at the webcam. I would like to be staring at you, to your eyes. But then when I'm staring at you to your eyes, my eyes are somewhere else than in the camera. So I would probably need some hardware to dance around this issue. With a live audience, that is not awkward at all. It's so easy to just walk in front of the audience and try to get eye contact with someone every now and then here and there to try to read the room better. And That has also made things a bit off. So, but you were saying that you are a live translator. Out of curiosity, how does this pan out when you're live translating a presentation? What would I, as a presenter, have to take into account if, you were now translating this into Brazilian or something?
Okay. The first two things a presenter can do to help a translator is mind their pace. So, speak at a reasonable pace. Doesn't need to be super slow, just regular conversational pace. Because you probably have seen some speakers at conferences that have 15 minutes and decide that they really need to share their whole life's work and they're going to go through 80 slides in those 15 minutes and do whatever they need to go through those slides. And that's when a translator panics and is like, oh, okay, this is my this is the hill I'm gonna die on now. This is where I meet my end. And the other thing is avoid super localized jokes. Jokes in general are killers for translators because it's hard to translate humor on the fly. A lot of things do not translate well between languages. If it's a pun or something like that, it more than likely will be lost. But if you make a reference, let's say you're giving a talk in Brazil, whether you came to Brazil or you're doing it via Zoom or whatever, and you make a joke that is very local to Finland, very cultural to you, if the audience does not understand that cultural reference, the translator is going to be sitting in the booth thinking, what do I do now? And trying to work around it because there ain't much we can do. If you can give a little bit of cultural background, maybe the translator will try to fit it in there. If not, we'll just work around it. But avoiding super local references and keeping a good pace are the two best things you can do to help a translator.
Do you have any funny stories to share of your own screw-ups? Those are always fun. Have you had any?
Not anything that's like terribly bad.
All right.
Fortunately, not anything terribly bad ever happened. I've had many mishaps of like after going fully remote, losing connection and stuff like that, but nothing too bad. But I have, as many other interpreters have done, this is something we actually do sometimes, when we realize that the speaker is going in for like kind of a long joke that has a story and a setup and everything, and we realize it's not going to land because it's either super cultural or it doesn't fit. I have said, and I have seen other interpreters go and say, this is meant to be a funny story. It's a super local reference. I am going to do my best, but please laugh when I tell you to laugh.
Right.
Audiences are generally
accommodate the speaker.
Yes, audiences are generally kind enough to do that, to laugh. Sometimes they laugh just because you said that and it's funny and it's awkward and they do laugh. So it works. It generally works. But other than that, no major funny stories.
When someone makes a long joke, I mean, you have to have a pretty awesome working memory to remember the beginning of it and try to deliver it all in one go. So, like, what is the longest that you can actually even act as a translator? I mean, you have to be focused all the time, like really focused, not to drop the ball. So
there are two different scenarios where I translate. There's the simultaneous translation where I'm speaking at the same time as the speaker, which means that's when exactly the pace of the speaker comes in and has a big influence on how I'm going to work with them. And there's what you said, which is the consecutive where I have to memorize things and speak. That one is harder in some circumstances. That's going to depend a lot on the speaker. Usually remembering 1 to 2 minutes is hard but doable. Usually we try to make the speakers mindful to go for a couple sentences, just a block of context that you can understand and translate, and move on from there. not all speakers will respect that. Some just get carried away and start going, and some think that they should speak at their own pace and will keep going. I remember very well on one of my first big assignments as what's called an escort interpreter, which means I was traveling around with a crew and going to meetings with them, where this big shot doctor in Brazil wanted to speak, and he wanted to speak a lot. He had a lot to say. And I let him know right at the beginning that I needed pauses to convey what he was saying. I was there with a legal notepad and taking notes to help my memory along. And every time he spoke a little longer. And I would kindly touch him in the arm to to get him to stop. After the third time I did that, he simply grabbed my hand and kept holding my hand over my wrist like this, stopping me from touching him, and spoke for 5 or 6 minutes in a row. So that was a pleasant experience. Not panic-inducing at all.
You summarized it in 5 seconds then. And that's it.
Yeah, kind of like that. A lot was lost there, I can promise you that, because I'm a good translator, but I'm not a miracle worker.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking, and of course it's a little bit of off topic of the remote talks for most, but I mean, we're just chatting for fun, is that I like to get carried away a lot. So if I make slides for a 15-minute talk and I prepare that, okay, these are the things that I'm going to talk, I will talk about A, B, and C. I will talk about A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G, and H, and I throw in stories from the news, from my life, and stuff like that. So that would probably require some calming down during the meeting. Because, the adrenaline kicks in, you start to talk, you get excited, and the energy kicks in. So it's going to be difficult to contain it to 2 sentences and a pause.
I have a feeling I'd much rather work with you as a simultaneous translator than doing it consecutive, than doing it after you speak. I'm pretty sure it would be easier for me.
Yeah. All right. So, what else should we be talking about? Preparation is something that I was also interested in. So, I have noticed this concrete problem for myself that now when I give a 90-minute lecture, my voice kind of stops working at some point. I never had that happen before the pandemic. It's not a problem to give a 2-hour talk in front of an audience and literally talk aloud, keep screaming, yelling, making jokes, having high energy, no problem. Now, at the 45-minute mark, my voice starts to break and I start feeling like, how is this still going on? What is happening? Why does this happen? And is there a way to combat that somehow?
Oh, that is really interesting. I'm guessing that the adrenaline was keeping you going a lot more on the live setting. Also, I'd advise you to look at what habits are a lot different now that you're doing it online. For example, are you drinking more coffee? Because coffee dries up the vocal folds and can have an impact in how long you can talk, how well your voice is going to sound. So that could be one reason why your voice is cracking up faster. On the other hand, I'm guessing you're doing most of the online things, you're sitting down. That means you're
now, yes.
You're breathing a different way, you're projecting your voice a different way. That can also have an impact on how you're producing your voice. You might be putting more strain to sound excited and to sound engaged than you were when you were standing up and walking and moving, potentially. Other than that, you could always, before the talk and even in daily life, add breathing exercises and vocal warm-up exercises that are quite simple. The breathing is simply getting used to doing deep breathing instead of breathing up in your chest, breathing down in your diaphragm, what's called as belly breathing by a lot of people, and doing things like humming at a comfortable pitch for a little while before speaking, tongue rolls, doing brrrs and brrrs and lip rolls to get your voice going. And other than that, drinking lots of water. That's always good for the voice. Being well hydrated is essential. And avoid like super cold water, like ice cold water. Either room temperature or a little cold. But
where's that?
Again, because of the...
Any good explanation?
I've heard a lot of scientific explanations over the years that I don't know if they're true, but I've heard those from speech therapists, because basically what you're trying to do is not shock the vocal folds into contracting due to the cold water going through the throat, and the idea is to keep them at a room temperature level and not create any differences, so they'll be fully relaxed and not contracted.
I can buy that. I mean, there's also an interesting sidetrack here. You said, I've heard a lot about scientific reasoning, this and that. I don't think everything needs to be even scientifically reasoned. As long as it works for you, I think there is a fair reason. I mean, it's good enough reason to try it and see if it works.
I agree.
In my world, there are a lot of people who are always saying that, no, that can't work because there's not a paper doesn't exist to say that it works. And it's like, who cares if it works for you? Just try it. If it works for you, whether it's placebo or some fairy dust magic, nobody cares as long as it makes your life a bit easier.
Yeah. The placebo effect
and I think
is
definitely
very real. The placebo effect is very real, and I always add that because little rituals before speaking can be very useful. Like the way you gear up to speaking, especially if you're someone who tends to get nervous when speaking, having certain rituals, even if it's just drinking water and warming up your voice, can get you into the zone, getting you into that mindset to speak, or that mindset that you're doing something a little different. And like you said, if it's just a placebo effect, who cares? If it calms you down, gets you engaged, gets you ready, it works for you. Go with it.
Yeah. I remember when I was giving my first conference talks, I used to have a little object in my pocket, like a paperclip. I heard that from somewhere, just to focus on the paperclip instead of the audience in the pocket. Nobody notices it, and it helped ease the anxiety and of course, the stress of giving a talk. And I still have some, so if I go to give a live talk somewhere, I do have some energetic playlist, usually live songs, which I listen to try to pretend that I'm a rock star. No problems giving the talk.
Right.
That stuff works. I'm pretty sure there is no paper proving that it works, but it works for me, so what do I care? Stuff like that. I think that covers actually most of the actual questions that I had written down before our talk. So there's nothing more on my list. Do we have anything in mind, in our collective two-people minds, around the subject that we would like to talk more about?
I can give some more preparation tips on how to prepare notes, or how to psych yourself up for before getting on stage, or calm yourself down.
Do that. That sounds very good.
Okay, so what I always tell people to focus on is, one of the things at least, is don't have fully written out notes if you can avoid it. Because if you do have like your whole talk written down word for word, especially now that you're online and you can have two screens, you can have your notes here, your presentation there. If you have it note for note, you are going to read it. And you know what? Reading out loud is not engaging. It's boring. Unless you're a professional voiceover artist and you can put in inflection there and everything, it sounds boring. You're gonna lose out on emphasis. You're gonna lose out on vocal variety. You're not going to be engaged. You're going to be reading. You're not going to be looking at the webcam. You're not going to be even looking at the people on screen. You're going to be looking at your notes. So get good at paring down your notes to either a mind map or to very short notes, bullet points, things that can guide you through your talk. but that are not necessarily word for word. What you can and should have there. Things that are very difficult to memorize, like specific figures, numbers, dates, names that you're going to mention. Those things are very good to be on notes, but avoid having every single thing you're going to say written down. You can write it down beforehand if that helps. You can have everything written down. You can practice with everything written down. But the notes you're going to use in the presentation, whether you're using cards, because you're live, or whether you're using presenter notes, or whether you're live and you have the view of the presenter notes, try to reduce that to bullet points or connections and the main facts you need to remember. So you won't be reading and you will be able to be more engaged in what you're saying. Another...
shorter notes.
Yes. Things that won't make you tempted to read everything. Because if you have the little crutch there, you will use it. You will look at it. You will be nervous. You will have that there. I say it for myself. I have done that. I was like, no, I'm going to have everything here just in case. And that just in case, you look at it and you go for it.
Yeah, and I bet the temptation is even higher now because you have all the extra screens, all the extra paper at your disposal, and you were just presenting to the webcam, whereas before you wouldn't be able to have like a book where you
exactly.
read from. Some people still had printouts earlier in the good old days, which is like 2 years ago. But even that, I guess it's not very optimal for the audience.
No, it really isn't. And the way you can have some connection right now is, as you said earlier, looking straight at the webcam, which can be a challenge too, because our eyes want to go to the people on screen.
Yes, all the time.
That takes some getting used to. I'm not going to lie, that took me a good 6 months to get more and more used to looking at the camera. A few tricks you can have are having a picture of someone behind the camera and feel like you're looking at them, because at the end of the day, the camera is not a camera. It's a bunch of other people seeing you on the other side. The camera is just providing that interface. So having a picture of someone behind the camera so you can keep your eyes more focused. I have a couple friends who put, especially on webcams, since they're like a slit, they put a smiley on each side of the webcam to help keep them focused, and it worked for them. I at first had a picture behind it. I found that one easier. And the picture, I feel that it makes it easier to keep you, for example, smiling, keep you engaging and trying to talk to as if you're talking to someone. Because at the end of the day, you are.
Debugging myself in real time here, using computer science terms, it's like I can't be looking at the camera when you are right there. It's like I'm losing all your gestures, I'm losing all your nuance if I'm looking at the camera, so it's really tricky.
Yeah.
I've seen some people have some special hardware for this, like, have a second screen, really tiny screen next to the webcam or something quirky like that, but you can't be doing that all the time.
No.
Especially if you're traveling or something.
Yeah.
You should probably hide your face and then just look at the camera and work with audio only.
Exactly. That's another very good tip. Like, if you're on a platform that allows it, hide self-view. You can have the other person, especially if it's a one-on-one conversation like this, because then when the other person is speaking, it's not that bad if you look at them while they're speaking. It's actually to get all these gestures. When you're speaking, keep your eye on the camera, but if possible, turn off self-view, because the self-view is only going to get you even more self-aware. When we're speaking in public or speaking in front of a camera, you are already usually hyper-aware. You're thinking, how do I look? Do I look okay? Do I sound good? Do I look like an idiot?
You don't know that. Now you have now you have a camera.
And you have a camera
all the time,
giving you that feedback all the time. And the temptation to look and be like, am I really going that bald that fast? Damn. Or anything that can take your attention off of what you're doing. Or start judging your gestures, and then you become like paralyzed because do my gestures look stupid or something like that. So
I think it was just I think it was just 2 days ago that Zoom announced that they have this, or Teams, Zoom or Teams has this feature now to hide yourself when you're talking for
Teams.
this specific reason.
Teams, Zoom has had it for a while. Teams has just added it because it's helpful. It helps you like stop looking at yourself and stop feeling. You still, if you already feel very self-conscious, it's not going to help you to be like looking at yourself all the time and thinking, "Oh Lord, does it look good?"
So we are now on Riverside, and I do confess that I have been looking at my own face as well during this conversation, which is utterly pointless because I know that I'm here. Why should I be looking at my own face? The only two things I should be focusing is your face and then the webcam when I'm talking. And that would be the key. And I also have the second screen open, which is just dumb because I'm not even using it. So my eyes go there every now and then,
exactly.
which is pointless. So
that's another good tip you can have, like eliminate distractions. For example, if you can, not even if you can, if you're giving the presentation, phone is at the very least in do not disturb. You wouldn't walk on stage with the phone, at least hopefully, a lot of people do, and then we have wonderful mishaps with the phone ringing during presentation. But ideally, you have it on do not disturb. At home, if you can, lock your phone in a drawer or in another room. That's even better to avoid any temptation of looking at it or anything and disengaging. Same thing as you just said, if you can turn off your second screen or put something to block it, great. I have my ring light in front of my second screen, and even if it's on, I'm not looking at it because it's very uncomfortable to look at it.
Right.
So eliminate that distraction. As many distractions as you can take away, self-view, anything else, the better, because when you're on stage live, that adrenaline will kick you up there, and it's very hard that you're going to pay attention to something else. But online, you can very easily disengage and look at a gazillion other things. So if you want to be present, put your computer on Do Not Disturb so that the conference software is the only thing that's open. If you can actually close everything else, put your phone away, avoid second screens. Sure, if you're using it to share, use it to share, but even then, if you can turn it off after it's sharing, that's great. Some computers will default back to one screen mode if you turn on the screen. You have to figure that out before the conference, how your computer's set up. But if you can't, like, just turn the monitor off and have it there and not even be looking at it, great. One less distraction to take your focus away.
There's a lot that we can do with the context itself and just software context. And I'm using a Mac, and most of the gizmos that we're using for communications these days, and WhatsApps, Telegrams, Teams, dozen Teams channels, they don't respect the Mac's Do Not Disturb mode at all.
Oh.
So the notifications still come through. And there's a curious feature in Teams when you're giving a talk with Teams. Of course, all the notifications still come through. So there is no way to turn off the notifications. And you know, when you're focusing on a talk and still dings come in from all the dozens of Teams, and I haven't found a way around that because if you're using Teams to present, Teams has to be open and you get the notifications.
Damn, I did not know that. That doesn't sound pleasant at all. It's horrible. And with the self view, as you said, we look at ourselves. It's a human bias. If you've read psychology books, I think Cialdini talks about it in either Influence or in Persuasion, like when you have a picture of yourself that has yourself in the crowd, you look at a picture of you and 20 other friends, your eyes are going to find you first and foremost in that picture. And online, the same thing. If you see yourself there, you're going to look at yourself. I've been training my eye to look at the webcam, and even now and then here at Riverside, where you can't do the hide self-view, I still from time to time sneak a look at myself, and like you said, Sam, we're here. We know we're here. We don't need to look at ourselves, but it happens.
Yeah, so I better find a way to block myself here in the future. I don't know if I switch tabs, will this even work because it's running in browser? I don't know. I'm not going to test right now. Maybe I'll play around with it when we're not recording. All right.
And you said you have a playlist to speak. You still use that before you speak to hype yourself up? Do you still use that online or?
Yes, if I give a conference talk, not for random meetings and stuff,
Right.
but for a talk that matters, I try to do that. But it feels a bit pointless because the high energy state doesn't work when you have a bunch of webcams there. And even worse, most conferences these days actually only show pre-recorded videos. So you don't even talk live.
Yeah.
Because the technology always fails.
Yes.
Even screen sharing, it just doesn't work. So all the conferences in my field have gone into mode where we send a 5-minute pre-recorded video, and that is played. Only that. And then there's a Q&A where the author is live. So there's a 5-minute video, a short Q&A, and the Q&A is the only part where you are actually live there. And that's another thing. I mean, talks used to be 15, 18, 20, sometimes even 25 minutes. Now, because of probably the shortened attention span, it's 5-minute pre-recorded videos. And it's pretty difficult to record that video because of the self-awareness, self-criticism. So you record the video over and over and over again. You spot every single little mistake you do. You re-record it and it's never done. Whereas for a live talk, you get exactly one shot and the adrenaline makes sure that you're happy after it because it's over.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's also... So the talk actually takes more time now to prepare than giving the live talk, which is quite counterintuitive, but that's how it goes. So.
It is very, very true. We translators have been going through something similar because it has become also very common for us to record videos too. Like get the video from the speaker in advance and record it in advance. And it's the same thing. Simultaneous interpreting, our goal is to get... Obviously we're trying to go for 100% of what is said, but the real life good average that we get is getting 80 to 90% of what is said and focusing on the real message of the speaker. So whatever the topic of the conversation is, getting 100% of that message and maybe losing a little greeting that he said, a little joke or something like that. But now if you're recording, you feel like you have to get 100% of everything. So you listen to the video once, you take notes, you record it, you hate it, you record it again. And something that would have taken you a day of preparation or two before the event and an hour at the event now becomes a day or two of preparation and a day or two of recording because you keep doing and redoing and redoing. So I very much relate to that. To that perfectionism that shows up.
Is that line of occupation paid by the hour or the gig? So what happens when you redo everything over and over again?
Yeah, it's not very profitable because we're usually paid by the gig. We're paid by the amount of hours, usually with recordings, that the recording has, not the amount of hours it takes. So...
Right.
It takes a lot. It takes a lot of self-discipline to be like, you know what, this is good enough. This is great. You don't need to be 100% perfect because otherwise, I'm shooting my career down the drain here.
Yeah, I can feel the pain, but you still have your own reputation on the line. Yeah. So if you spot one mistake somewhere, you're like, okay, I'll just shoot it once more to make it perfect.
Yeah. So it becomes a real. Let's say I was already acquainted with editing software. I became a lot more acquainted with editing software over the last couple of years.
Of course, yeah. So this post-processing also is always an option.
Yes.
All right. How about toward the end of this, I think we can wrap it up soon. Talk to me about Build Your Voice in 6 weeks.
Okay. All right. So,
what is Build Your Voice in 6 weeks?
Build Your Voice in 6 weeks is a cohort-based program that I've developed based on many years helping people speak and developing my own speaking skills. Because even though I've been only working myself as a speaker in the last few years, part of a live translator training is training to become a better speaker. So learning to identify the qualities of a good speech, how to produce good speech, how to have control over your voice, control over the tonal qualities, control over filler words, and many other technical aspects. So I developed a program for people who are starting to get into speaking or want to improve. People who feel too nervous, people who feel too anxious, people who feel like their voice isn't the best yet, so that they can feel comfortable speaking up on meetings, walking up on a stage and talking, or recording a podcast, recording a YouTube video, different scenarios where people can learn to be better speakers, better communicators, and more confident in their message. The idea is to walk through several different aspects and steps of speaking, starting with the mindset. How do you get into the right frame of mind for speaking? How do you face any imposter syndrome you might be facing, or any nervousness about talking in front of a crowd, to breathing technique, vocal technique, how to work with the webcam, how to work with eye contact, and several other fundamentals of good public speaking, so that people can develop that confidence. And the idea behind having it as a cohort is you get to do that in a safe environment with other people watching you. You have a small audience present. You're going to do things both online, which is in a Zoom session with the people watching you and hearing you and giving you live feedback. And you're also going to do recorded things where you record yourself, where you test different things out, and you get feedback both from me and from your other peers in the cohort. Because that's the thing, as we've been discussing right now, the self-criticism can be very brutal. You can hate everything you do, and especially if you're already insecure about speaking, you can do a great video, or a video that would be fine and that people would watch and have no issue with it, but to you it looks terrible because you don't like your voice, you don't like your gestures, you don't like how you kept eye contact. So the idea is, let's get some external feedback. Let's get someone from the outside looking in to tell you, hey, I like this. This you could work on. This you need to do more of, and find what you need to do to get your speaking. And at the end of the day, just the idea that you have to put in the reps. You have to practice. You have to. You won't get better at speaking if you're not speaking. And jumping into speaking at a conference can really be super scary. So we work it up. We have assignments with 1 to 2 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, working up to an assignment where you're going to talk to 6 to 10 minutes. So the idea is, over the 6 weeks, you pace yourself and learn different things and get more and more used to speaking in front of an audience or in front of a camera. That's the whole idea behind it.
Sounds very good, and I think it's also very useful, especially for probably actually my generation. The ones that are a bit older are probably, I'm just throwing this out of my own experience, we are probably more self-aware, or we are too harsh on ourselves. The imposter syndrome kicks in. Whereas then the 12-year-old kids, they all have their TikTok accounts, they all have their YouTube accounts. They grow up with these streaming technologies, and they build their voice somehow naturally when they are not yet so harsh on themselves.
Yes.
Then it's the Simos of the world who are scared to go on YouTube because, oh my God, somebody might actually watch me. And it's like, no, I can't do that. So a cohort is a great way to do that in a safe environment, like you said. I think that's fantastic. And it's really nice to see people also transforming themselves or moving into this education space when we have people like you who have built years and years of experience on this. Why not share it? And to be quite direct, why not share it and make money at the same time? Like,
precisely.
Nobody expects to go into a cohort and get all of it for free if it's a useful thing. Investing in yourself is a great way to spend all that hard-earned money over the years to learn a new skill. So.
Exactly, and
So I'm really happy that you did that.
Yeah,
so.
and speaking can really be a booster in anyone's career because you can get noticed by people. You can make a lot more connections at a networking event by being on stage than by being at the audience. You're reaching a much higher number of people than you can just by walking around and talking to people one by one. My experience as a speaker in the translation industry itself, speaking in conferences, what was the result? I got hired by other colleagues as an interpreter. One of the first big talks to like 200-300 people that I gave was about translation in health tech, in the area of health and technology and what was coming in digital health, health 4.0, all of this. And basically giving healthcare translators an overview of, hey, this is what's new, these are the terms that are appearing, these are the things that you need to be aware of. If you don't know about technology, maybe this is the time you need to start caring about technology because you're going to start seeing that a lot in healthcare. And that talk alone resulted in me working for a colleague that works for the World Health Organization. She does a lot of work for them and hires out because it's a huge volume of materials, so I did a lot more written translation with her. Another colleague who was like, oh, whenever I have any conference now that has anything IT, I'm calling you. And those kinds of things. I wouldn't have made those connections. They wouldn't have seen me as an expert that fast without me being on stage. It would have taken a whole other level of building that connection, of talking to them one-on-one, talking about what I've done. Maybe they would give me a small assignment at some time and see if they like what I did or not, and then work from there. I fast-tracked a bunch of connections by being on stage. You get a lot more notice.
And also, like, I don't want to downplay the role of books. I mean, I
Yes.
think books and written text still has a really big role, especially so in academia. But again, going back to the TikTok generation, they are not going to stop consuming video and audio. So once they grow up and become the dominant class of humans on this planet, it's going to be all about audio and video.
Yes.
So if you want to stay relevant, you want to stay on top of the curve, you might as well bite the bullet and go online. And I think I talked to you about this earlier somewhere online, that for me it's always been difficult to be, for example, on public platforms. I have zero problems whatsoever to go give a class to 150 students, either live or through webcam. I feel confident. I feel that I have the authority. I feel that I got this. But then when it comes to shooting a video and putting it on YouTube or Twitter or anywhere on live, the imposter syndrome kicks in and I'm like, what am I doing? Why should I be uploading anything here? There are other people here who are doing this better than me. And that is really weird, because I know there's no rational reason for any of that. But it's real. It's so real. So this kind of a cohort probably could help also. I mean, you know, like the capstone project of your cohort. Now go and upload it actually live.
Right, yeah.
So
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know if you're doing that, but that would probably be really helpful. So.
I encourage that. I encourage them to work on their final 6 to 10 minute assignment as something that they will post on YouTube. Even if they don't, I'm not going to force
so
anyone.
cool.
But I encourage them. The two things I encourage them to do: join a social audio room like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces and participate throughout the cohort. Even if just to join in and ask one single question. You don't need to host your own room. You don't need to go through that, but at least join one that has open mic or has open Q&A, and at least interact, and to focus on the last project as if this is going to go on YouTube. And if you feel comfortable, put it on YouTube. If not, that's fine.
Yeah.
But work on it for that. Because I do get what you're saying. It hits different because you have no control over who's going to watch it, who's going to judge it, who's going to be out there saying whatever about it. So it's a whole different beast.
Yeah, I just hosted my first Twitter Spaces myself 2 days ago. It feels different than giving a lecture, even though both of them are live situation, and I still can't decipher why exactly, but it's different.
It is.
It is.
It feels different. And with the YouTube, what you have to keep in mind is, at least that's what I say about speaking in general, is imposter syndrome does kick in, but you got to remember that even if you're not the top of the field, or you're not someone who has the most original take on something or a breakthrough on something, your perspective, the way you see things, can connect to people in ways that maybe other people didn't. So it may be the same message or the same piece of information that's already out there in 50 other YouTube channels. But maybe for some reason, someone's going to watch yours and connect to yours and understand yours. So there's always value in putting your perspective out there.
And then the sort of biggest mind shift change for me with this thinking has also been that I'm not trying to talk to the guys who are better than me. I'm trying to find the audience who has something to learn from the whatever level I am on with the specific topic. My audience is not the ones who already know everything, who don't want to listen to me. Why would I care if those people
exactly
don't care what I have to say? So it's like just trying to mentally figure out your audience is really, really important. And it sort of alleviates the pain of trying to go online.
That's a great point, because most of the time you're doing exactly that. You're not talking to someone at your level or above your level. You're trying to bring along someone who's 2, 3, maybe 5 steps behind you. So you don't need to be worried about, as you just said, why would you care about the top expert and what he or she's going to think? No, you need to be understandable to someone who's going to watch and learn from you, who's trying to get to where you are first. So that is a very good mindset shift to have there, to realize, okay, I don't need to be talking to the expert. I need to be talking to someone who wants to learn from me.
This came from our mutual friend Joe Justice. So we can give him a good shout out.
That makes sense.
He's got a lot of good points with this.
He does. Yes.
All right, Arthur, shall we wrap it up
and
move on with our days?
This has been great.
This was my first jab at putting something publicly online, which I will be doing with this. And thank you for joining me this wonderful afternoon. So it's a beautiful morning there, right? So
it is. It's cold, but the sun is out, so there we go.
Yeah, we have still darkness and snow here, so I'll be getting along with that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Before I go, where can we find you? Let me pull out your Twitter handle. You are DevLinguistic on Twitter. That's your main social.
That's my main social. That's
network,
where people can find me. They can find information on the cohort there. They can find. I have a series of 30 videos on tips on speaking that is 100% free. You can get that on Twitter as well. You can find that as my pinned tweet. If you go onto my profile on Twitter, the first thing you're going to see is 30 videos on how to become a better speaker.
Exactly. So go to Twitter, in the search bar, hit Arthur Diaz, the King's Voice.
Exactly.
The King's Voice. That's very cool. And they'll find you. All right. Thank you.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for
having me.
Have a
good day, my friend.
You too.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.